Good morning, good evening, hello, wherever you are, and welcome to the second in UCA's ongoing series on the coronavirus initiative. We are happy to have all of you here. Looks like we have a good crowd here today. Glad to see all of you. I am, as the screen that is hopefully up is telling you, I am William Watson Canning. Please call me Bill. And I'm the president of University Consultants of America. Prior to being at University Consultants of America, I had a background in digital curriculum design. That's a nice way of saying online learning. So I'm very familiar with some of the ways that schools had to adjust recently. But before all of that, this is the only job I've ever had in my life where it is important to talk frequently about where I attended my undergraduate institution for university. I did go to Princeton University. And one thing that this job forces me to reflect on frequently is what it was that led me towards that university. And of course, I had excellent grades. I had strong essays, good test scores, all that kind of thing. But when it came to what I did outside the classroom, which is what we'll be talking about today, I was involved in a bunch of things, the newspaper and a math team, and but I was really a theater kid, and I went deeply into playwriting. Writing plays for the stage, won some major competitions, put on a bunch of my shows all before the age of 18. And that's the kind of impact that can really make a difference, because as Bob discussed, for those of you who were here last week, universities are really looking at three areas when it comes time for them to evaluate your candidacy at a selective university. And he put up the Harvard form, which I have up on the screen again today. But the idea here, assuming you were seeing my screen correctly, and nobody is Q&Ing saying that they're not, the idea here is that you are being evaluated on your academics, you're being evaluated on personal qualities, but you're also being evaluated in this middle area, your extracurriculars. Athletics, community, employment, family commitments. What is it you do when you are not being required to sit in the classroom, or as the case is right now for many of you, sit online and learn a specific subject that your school has ordered you to learn? What is it you do voluntarily? What is it you like to do when you have a choice? And to sort of prove the point a little further, it's not just the Harvard form. Every one of these schools, they may phrase things a little differently, but they are looking at your activities. They're looking at the impact you make there and what you do there, because what a university admission is a certain bet on your future. What is it you are going to achieve in the future? It is not just a reward for what you've done in the past. And showing that you have the initiative to go out and do things on your own is part of how you are proving that you have that sort of future potential. So let's talk a little about how universities are actually going to assess that extracurricular area of your application. And if I do this correctly, what I have up on the screen right now is the Common Application interface. The Common Application is used by the vast majority of selective colleges in the United States to evaluate your application. It's where you will fill out work. You will fill out a certain amount of things that are common to all schools, and then you'll fill out things that are specific to certain schools that you might be targeting. And what I have up here is the common area of the Common Application, the stuff you only have to fill out once. Thankfully, you only have to tell them your name you'll fill out your name and information about your family. Presumably that's going to be the same information that goes to the University of Southern California, as goes to Northwestern University, as goes to pick a school. As I said, the vast majority of schools are on this application. And you can see here on the left, profile information, family, education, testing. Yes, we'll be talking about testing soon. But there's an area here for activities. And what the Common Application tells you is reporting activities can help colleges better understand your life outside the classroom. And examples of activities might include, and there are eight bullet points here. And you can see it is a very broad definition of activities. Again, anything you do when you are not being told you have to do it by your school, meaning that you have to sit there in math class, anything you do outside of the classroom can count as an extracurricular. So if you're in the arts or music, of course, various clubs around the school, things you do out in the community, but then you even look at, family responsibilities and hobbies. We've had students who have to care for family members. That is something that requires a great deal of their time. It is just about the most important thing you can do is care for your family, of course. That is something that colleges want to know about if it is a genuine responsibility. Putting down that you are required to empty the kitchen trash once a week, maybe not so much. But if you are responsible for looking after a younger sibling or caring for an older relative in some way, absolutely. Hobbies, just because it is not part of a formal organization doesn't mean it's not an activity. In fact, I mentioned earlier, my thing when I was in high school was theater and playwriting. I was putting on shows myself outside of formal areas, putting together a reading of a play I might have written. That is the kind of thing that there's no club name I get to put on the top of that resume item, but it's something that I very much did. And you may have similar things that you do. And if they take up your time, it is worth talking about. Then you got sports, work, volunteering, and of course the catch-all other experiences that might be meaningful to you. There is a broad definition of activities. Now, as we scroll down, what you can see here, depending on how far I scroll, you get a limited amount of space to discuss each of your activities. And you only get to list up to 10 activities. So those of you who are concerned that everything you were doing from 9th grade on is part of your permanent record, and if you went to one meeting in the speech and debate club and dropped out, schools are going to look at that as somehow being a quitter. No. You are going to choose the 10 most important things to you, 10 things that tell a story about who you are. As I mentioned earlier, just using myself as an example, I had worked for the school newspaper, track, whatever. But I very much wanted to lead with the theater stuff, because the very first thing that I wanted people reading my application to see was, okay, this is somebody who is deeply involved in the theater world. That was sort of my major activity at the time. So I want you to think very much about what the first couple of activities are that people are going to read. We like to use the example around here of the different story you can tell depending on how you lead with your activities list. If you are a member of the student council who also volunteers at a food bank and is also on the basketball team, if you make the very first activity you list your time on the basketball team, the first thing an admissions officer is going to think is, okay, we have an athlete here. If you were to lead with the food bank, you're maybe a community-minded person. And lead with the student council, okay, perhaps a future politician. So certainly you get a chance to flush out and bring more depth to that activities list as you go, and to yourself on the other parts of your application. But think seriously about what story you want to tell. There's a good story to tell with any of those three scenarios I just listed there. Athletes, community-minded people, future politicians are all over our top universities and indeed the world. But think about what the story is that you're telling. When it comes time to creating your activities, you're going to tell them kind of the category that an activity was in. There's a long list that sort of search through. And by the way, you can set up a Common Application account at any time, although it's not really worth starting to fill it out until at least August. You're going to get a really short area to enter in some information about the position that you held in that organization. And we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. And then you are going to get a maximum of 150 characters to tell them everything that is important to you about that activity. Not a lot of space. About well, Twitter has increased its length, so it's far short. It's about half the length of a tweet now. That you are trying to sum up what you've done over 4 years of high school, or even longer. You're only going to tell them if you participated in 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. But if you have been playing the piano since 2nd grade, you can certainly indicate that in your description. 10 years experience in piano competitions. But you are going to need to think seriously about how to describe the most important thing about what you have done in that activity. And you're not going to want to waste time in that description. If you've been playing the piano for 10 years, you don't need to spend half your description explaining to the person reading what a piano is. Don't tell them that you played an instrument with 88 keys that creates music. They know already. Generally, unless you have a very obscure activity that you're engaged in, you can jump straight into talking about what you did and your impact. And then there are various times here where you're going to tell them how much time you spend each week doing it, how many weeks per year, whether you're going to keep doing something similar in college, which presumably you are. Even if you're not going to do the same thing, you're probably going to do something similar. Otherwise, why are you bothering telling them? Again, if I went to one meeting of speech and debate in 9th grade and decided it wasn't for me, not really relevant who I might be going into my college years. All right, so let's talk a little bit more, and just in case the Common App wasn't up, I had a couple of screenshots there in PowerPoint, but let's get on to what it is that schools are evaluating and trying to see when they are considering your activities resume. And it really comes down to, four kind of key areas here. Number one, hit the button too quickly. The amount of time that you have spent on that activity. It is far better to have spent 10 years doing something than the past 10 days doing something. There's a trick that a few misguided souls try to play every year, which is to join a bunch of clubs in 12th grade so that they can fill up their activities resume. Nobody's fooled, right? If you've been a member of the Spanish club for 2 weeks in October of your senior year, probably not something that's been very important to you all along, or why didn't you join it earlier? So the amount of time that you spent on the activity wins. But of course, playing the piano for 10 years, if you still haven't figured out how to do basic scales, is really not particularly impressive. So the second thing that schools are, of course, looking for is your level of achievement. What is it you have accomplished within the activity? This is where things like awards and leadership positions become important. So certainly whatever recognition you have achieved from it's sort of confirmation that you're kind of good at what it is that you like to do from an outside source. What is it that you've achieved in there? Now, achievement is to some degree within your control and to some degree not. If you ran for president of the club and your arch rival at the school got the position instead of you, life's unfair. It'd be nice if everybody could get to be president. Not necessarily the case, but it doesn't mean you can't achieve in other areas. Sometimes that might mean changing your focus to another one of your activities, but there can also be value to saying, okay, well, while I was not elected president of whatever club my senior year, perhaps I was able to take a secretary position and do things with that, which leads to the third area that schools are going to be evaluating. And I often think that this is even more important than achievement. and that is the impact that you have made. We all are familiar with the type of organization where somebody gets elected to be an officer and then does nothing. They put the line item on their resume. Hey, I was, the president of president of the math team, and all it was a title because the faculty member advising us actually did everything. So what is it you have done? What sort of impact have you made on other people and on the world through the work that you have done? So again, if maybe you don't have that fancy leadership title, but if you organized the entire food drive for the club, that is having some sort of impact. And also want you to think about the scope of the impact that you can have. Because the larger the scope, the better. I often use the example of sports, but this is true for whatever area you are interested in. Depending on how things evolve from a public health standpoint, we are still right now scheduled to have an Olympics, Summer Olympics in a couple of months in Japan. There are going to be people under the age of 18 competing in those Olympics. Those people are making quite, that's both a high level of achievement and quite a high level of impact on a global stage. In fact, if I were to go back and pull up that Harvard form, you would see that one of the questions on that form is about the scope of the impact of your extracurriculars. Are you known on a global, national, or state level for what you do, depending on how your community is structured? But relatively few people go to the Olympics on a global scale. But continuing with athletics, so maybe if you're not at an Olympic level, are you known at kind of a citywide level or a statewide level, depending on how your community is structured? Are you known as a starter on the team? Are you somebody who sits on the bench all the time? These are all different levels of both achievement and impact. But what is the stage on which you are performing? And I say stage and performing as a theater person, but it's true whatever kind of activity you are engaged in. And the last of the four areas is originality. If you are doing the same thing as everybody else, it is very difficult for your application to stand out. We in our work as consultants, we see this kind of herd mentality happening all the time, where the past couple of years, we sort of see a lot of students creating an app to do something, to accomplish a task. And the first time I encountered it, so, wow, okay, that's great. You've got a 17-year-old, 18-year-old who's created her own app, and seems to be getting a lot of downloads. And then the 50th, 100th, 200th time you hear it, you're sort of saying, okay, a lot of people are creating apps. That's not the kind of thing that's going to stand out from the pile. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. We don't have to be original, impactful, and high achievers in every area of our life. But you are trying to stand out from that pile of applications somehow. And what is the original thing you are doing that is going to be in some way memorable to the person reading your application down the road, for them to somehow say, oh, right, that person. In my case, years ago, the playwright who was putting on his own shows. But in other cases that we've seen, perhaps it's a student a couple of years ago who sort of created his own kind of comic book outreach kind of thing. He's the comic book guy. It was a different kind of thing. So time, achievement, impact, and originality. It's a lot to pile into things, but I will remind you that while it is relatively rare for a 17 or 18-year-old to win a Nobel Prize or cure a rare disease, it's not impossible. It does happen. There are students out there who, even as teenagers, are kind of known on a global scale, right? You've got Greta Thunberg, you've got Ren Kwan there, did literally win an Olympic gold, I think 15 or 16. My daughter's favorite show on Netflix, Stranger Things. These are teenagers who, assuming they were to apply to university, are going to be standing out from the pile already. And there's nothing that says a teenager can't be achieving at that kind of level. Not all of them, not everybody walking around the halls of Dartmouth College or Columbia is a gold medalist who's been named Times Person of the Year and what have you. But those students exist, right? And that is the arena in which you're trying to compete. Now, let's get real. We are facing a specific public health crisis right now, pretty much everywhere in the world. In all of our communities are affected right now, and it is going to be very difficult for you to have some of that impact and achieve when your sports team can't actually play or your orchestra can't actually practice and perform together. I understand that, and the good news is universities understand that as well. It just sort of quickly went on Twitter a day or so ago, and it was not difficult for me to find messages from top admissions departments in the United States reminding students they know you're stuck at home. They know you might be quarantined. They know that activities are going to be canceled. School plays are not going to be put on. Sports competitions are not going to be held. Concerts are not going to be held. You are not going to be traveling to a mile of the United Nations kind of thing. You are all in the same boat. And moreover, universities are very aware of this and are going to be distinguishing as we get into next year. They're not going to be looking at applications wondering what on earth happened at the beginning of 2020 that prevented this student from, as I say, being able to perform in a concert or go to a mile of the United Nations. So you have some cover there. At the same time, that doesn't mean you can't still be out there doing something, or not out there doing something, in there doing something. Here's the deal. Here's the pep talk part of the program. You have a chance to make this an opportunity. You have a chance right now because everybody is in this boat, sort of thinking, okay, well, I can't really do anything with my extracurriculars, so I'm just going to let them slide. You can reach out. You can reach out beyond yourself to make that impact and show some originality. If you have not already, reach out to your faculty and your advisors and your counselors at your school. If you are on the student council, if you're on the sports team, ask what you can do right now to help others in your community, to help the school, to connect with others. And connect with others. Reach out to your fellow club members. If it is a student council, is there some kind of initiative you can be undertaking right now, even while you are not necessarily able to meet and go out directly into the community? You can also reach out beyond your school. You are all watching this right now through the magic of something called the internet. The internet is connecting you to me here in an office building in Tampa, Florida, in the United States. It connects you anywhere in the world. And you can connect to other people who share your interests. This is something that we see frequently with students now. I have a student this year who's he's a programmer who has set up his own sort of code sharing board for programmers all over the world, where they can kind of advise each other on swatches of code and what have you. I'm not a super IT guy, so I apologize if I'm misphrasing a little, but that's an example. That's something he was doing before the public health crisis, of course, but it's something that you can be doing. You can be setting up that community of violinists stuck in the house. I don't know, get together and play a quartet over the internet or something. But there are, if you are the person who is still forging those connections while everybody else is stuck home, you're going to have some originality there. You might even have some impact. Your time is continuing, and who knows, you might achieve things. Look, these are important skills to develop at any time. Even as adults, you're going to find you're going to have to use your creativity in these situations. Right now, normally this time of year, the leadership of our organization is traveling around the world so we can speak to people and meet people. We're not able to do that right now, so it's a chance for us to retrench and improve other areas of our business. So if you start practicing that kind of approach now, when you are still in your high school years, it's going to be an opportunity for later. Now, the number one thing always, continue to look after yourself and your loved ones. That comes first, of course, always. Yes, maintain your grades, even through the online courses that have you stuck at your computer. But then, after that, after you've looked after your loved ones and done the work that you have to do and looked after yourself, start thinking about how you can reach out, how you can make that impact. This is an opportunity that's out there for you right now. And I know you can do it. And I encourage you to go out there or reach out beyond yourself and take this chance to be exceptional and extraordinary. And that concludes this week's overview of how universities evaluate activities and some of the challenges that we know you are facing right now. I hope that you will join us. Thank you for having joined us for 2 weeks now. I hope you will join us next week, where we are going to be discussing something I know is always of interest to people considering universities around the world, and especially in the United States, which is the SAT. Test dates are adjusting, locations are adjusting in response. Already obviously some dates have been canceled. But we're also going to start talking a little bit about preparation and even how to get a free diagnostic test. And this is all leading up to the week after, spoilers ahead, where we're going to have an actual test tutor speaking to you about some of the opportunities there. So I do encourage you to join us there. The link for that webinar, and again, we're sorry that it can't be the same link every week, but since we have different speakers and even different times, days of the week and times, it does have to be a different registration every week. That link will go out with the newsletter that goes out tomorrow. So I hope to see you there. Thank you to those of you who've been submitting questions. I will be answering some of those in our newsletter that goes out tomorrow. And on the topic of that newsletter, I know a few of you attend these webinars, but aren't necessarily on the list, and so you're not getting notified as promptly as you could. So I'm going to leave this up on the screen just for a minute or two here. You can either email us directly for some information about how to get signed up, or just make sure you sign up for our newsletter. It's kind of hard for me to get the link to you if you don't get your email to us, but here's how you get the email to us. Write down that link, mlgn.to/7ogv, and you can go ahead and register, and you'll be on the communication list for the rest of the series. So thank you once again. I wish you all luck and encourage you to seize this opportunity, and good luck to all of you. Thank you.